Welcome to Coffee, Eggs and Inspiration. It's a weekly show that goes out over YouTube and as a podcast over all of the major channels. And each week I get to sit with an inspiring person and listen to them tell their story and share it with all of you. This week is no different. I'm here with Hilary Timmins. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm pleased to think that you think I'm inspiring.
Well, you certainly are, and also incredibly intimidating, I have to say. I'm doing an interview here, and Hilary has built a career in TV, interviewing people. So
no, you're a pro. I've watched what you've been doing. Very good, very good.
Will you give me tips along the way if you tell me what questions to ask? Okay, I'm going to give you smooth. I'm going to give you a bit of a bio so everyone knows the talent that they're watching here today. So you were born like me, actually, in Auckland, unlike me to Scottish parents. Started out as a model in a modelling career, and we'll sort of discuss the story of how you fell into that, and then went into TV where you remain, a very impressive career that's taken you through a number of different programs and series, starting with It's in the Bag. For those Kiwis watching, they will recognise that. Amazing memories of Selwyn Toogood and Hilary and John Hawkesby and others along the way who hosted that. Lotto, America's Cup, covering America's Cup telethons, which is a charity event that used to run in New Zealand for good causes, and over the years has interviewed some pretty impressive people, including Michael Crawford, Danny Minogue, Christina Aguilera, Jewel, Vanessa Mae, Jonah Lomu, Sir Peter Blake, and the list goes on. Too long for me to read it all here. One of the episodes of It's in the Bag, which I'd like to talk to you about, was actually filmed in Antarctica, so we'll come to that.
I thought you were going to say you knew someone that had been on it.
No.
My mum won the washing machine.
What's it to be, Hokitika? And currently working on a series, actually having first already completed a series called Dreamcatchers, which we'll talk about. I actually binge watched it on Air New Zealand on my trip last year and found it incredibly inspiring. Lives in London, we both do, so we're both expats now, but travels back to New Zealand quite a lot. Very active in charity. What an impressive track record. So take us back to the beginning in Auckland.
Yeah.
How'd you get into modelling?
Well, I was working at a place called Pakatoa Reservations. I don't know if you remember, there was an island in the Hauraki Gulf called Pakatoa Island. Yeah. And there was a girl that I worked there with, Fiona, whose boyfriend was a cameraman, and they were looking for a girl to be in a music video, and asked if I would do it. And the director of that then went on to film several other commercials and asked if I would be in those commercials. So it was complete fluke, really. If it hadn't have been,
so just you happened to be there, or put your hand up?
Well, they were, Fiona and John, the cameraman, were really encouraging of me going out and doing this. And then I just started to get more and more commercial work. Was doing a lot of commercials for the American market. And we were chatting earlier about the strange situation you had with casting in those days, where I was cast as a mother for a commercial for, I can't remember whether it was America or Canada, and I was 18 at the time, and I had a 12-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter. So, maybe I just looked really old for my age, I don't know. But because the Americans or the Canadians thought that was okay, then the New Zealand market cast us as a family in the Watties tomato sauce
and it
ads,
became a franchise.
It became kind of like...
Goodness me. Can you remember the music video? What was the music?
Yeah. I can't remember the name of the band.
Radio with Pictures days?
No, they were just starting out actually. They weren't bad, they were pretty good. It began with a K, I think. Anyway, it's a long time ago, Craig.
I'll link it below. Fair enough. And then how did you progress from modelling into TV? What was that story?
Okay, well in those days you would do the beauty pageants. That was kind of where you were encouraged to go, because it was also quite good for learning public speaking. It was a way to sort of get yourself out there. They were actually great fun to do because they'd often in those days be pretty well choreographed, like, you know, the Benson & Hedges Fashion Awards and things like that were all really tightly choreographed, so they were really interesting projects to work on. And so I did this because this was what the agencies encouraged, and it became Miss West Auckland, even though I did not live in West Auckland.
You weren't a Westie?
I wasn't a Westie. Pretty close, Green Lane.
Oh yeah, that qualifies.
An Eastie.
Eastie, yeah.
And then that took you into the Miss Aucklands, and I was really fortunate, again, luck, huge part to play. The choreographer of the Miss Auckland pageant, and it was a big thing that they do in those days, turned out to be a director and producer at TVNZ.
Right.
And so I had no idea, but at that point they were thinking of bringing back It's in the Bag, which had been kind of a staple of New Zealand television for years and years and years, with Selwyn Toogood, and they decided to resurrect it. And so he asked if I would come along to an audition, which was done in front of a live audience. Yeah. Selwyn was there, and John Hawkesby.
They were all live, weren't they?
They were recorded as live.
Yeah.
And we would, I think the Christmas specials were often went out live.
Live in real time.
But yeah, we did have some funny things happen because they were recorded as live, obviously, as you do. So anyway, I got the gig, but yeah, I was completely inexperienced at working on a big production like that.
Right.
And I remember the first show that we did was in Palmerston North in the big town hall there, because we tour around New Zealand and do them in the smaller centres, and it was a big deal. We'd follow this other show round called L&P Top Town.
That's right.
Yeah, so we'd be like a big family of 30 of us on the road, so it was great fun.
The big TV celebs rolling into town.
And they were really lovely, because whatever ticket sales happened on the night, they'd go to a local charity, and we'd film around the town as well, so it was quite good. But yeah, this first time on the stage, and somebody said, could someone please shift the blonde? And I was like, all right, it's a bit rude, but where would you like me to go? And I didn't realise they were actually talking about the lights. They call them reds and blondes.
Reds and blondes, oh, that's hilarious.
So yeah, we had, and we often had things happen live that if you were lucky and it happened at the top of the show, you could actually stop and start again. And one of the things that happened to me was we used to have, in those days, these massive batteries for our microphones. Yeah. And they would strap them onto your back or onto your leg or somewhere, and then they'd try and hide them in the dress. But all it did was look like you had a hunchback or a deformed leg. It was really awful. So I would try and hide these things discreetly, and then you'd feed a wire up to the thing. And I can remember walking onto the stage for one show and just feeling this thunk.
Battery.
Thinking, oh my gosh, I think that's my battery. I really hope it's not taking anything else with it, like my underclothes or anything like that, and I couldn't look down, and I was just desperately hoping that John or the floor manager had noticed this big brick being dragged along after me.
Oh my goodness.
And fortunately they had, so they stopped and started again.
Yeah. There may be some people watching who don't know the format. It's like second nature to me. It's in my heart, it's in the bag, but perhaps just describe what the show was all about.
Okay, well, first of all, we never screened our contestants, so it would just be the luck of the draw if you got on the night from the local crowd. And you would be asked 3 questions. Normally they'd be quite simple, but because people would be completely stage struck or never been on a stage in front of their friends and family before,
cameras,
often they get the answer wrong or answer in some way that would cause a lot of laughs. And basically, if they got through, then they would be offered the choice of either a bag, so one of my bags, numbers 1 to 15, or the cash, which John would offer them. And in amongst my bags, there would be some fabulous prizes, but there would also be 3 booby prizes. Right. So, they would get that choice, and then it would be, I've taken the bag and missed out on 1,000 bucks or something like that.
And get a wooden spoon or something.
Yeah. Well, one awful one was in Westport, and they just made a lot of redundancies for the miners, and one poor guy turned down $1,000, which in those days, this is back in the late 80s, it was quite a lot of money. And he won a lump of coal. It was awful. But you know what? The amazing thing about It's in the Bag and the people that, came on it was that they just came on with the right attitude. His attitude was, I came with nothing, I've gone home with nothing, but I've had a really good time. Really
that's
lovely
a lovely story. What was the sort of strangest or most peculiar thing that happened? Can you? Because unscreened, you're taking high risk, aren't you? Because you really don't know what you're going to get from the audience.
Yeah. Somebody said that they'd take the bag and walked off with me. Which, is that offensive? Maybe a little.
And then you progressed on from this and did many things. Lotto was a long gig for you. It was 16 years, right? Talk about that.
Well, from It's in the Bag, very sadly what happened with It's in the Bag was we did a sort of the final swan song where we went to Antarctica and did a Christmas special down there, which was pretty extraordinary.
And this was on Scott Base, right?
This was Scott Base, yeah. Basically they wanted to expose what they were doing in terms of research on the ice to a wider, more general sort of audience.
Yeah.
So this was a big Christmas special that we did, and went out and filmed in amongst the penguin colonies, and went across the ice shelves and interviewed the scientists and things. It was just unbelievable. And that was sort of pretty much our last Christmas special that we did. And what was happening was the bigger game shows offering the massive prizes. They were, a lot more kind of ritzy and glam, like Sale of the Century and Wheel of Fortune were coming in to the New Zealand market. And the feeling was that It's in the Bag, despite the fact that it was, still #1 kind of rating show, they thought it wouldn't be able to compete with them. So it got axed, and so I had a couple of years where it was a bit thin on the ground. I was doing guest shows, for game shows that they had over there, and celebrity stuff that they did. And I went and did a theatre course and decided I loved theatre, and was actually going to head over here. And that would have been about 1991, when I got a call from New Zealand Lotteries Commission about doing this program called Kiwi Winners, which was basically covering stories about lottery grants. So going around filming the stories and
the people who won.
No, the lottery funding. So because they changed a lot of things that used to be government funded. Suddenly we're getting their funding from the Lotteries Commission. Remember the old golden Kiwi tickets and things like that? That was where Lotto sort of started. And so they started to fund through the Hillary Commission. Not me, but Sir Edmund Hillary. Actually, we used to laugh because the guy who first started doing the draw with Grant Kiriyama, we used to laugh because it was the Hillary Commission and the lottery grants. But we went around the countryside filming these recipients of lottery funding, and it was all sorts of things. So you'd have age concern, you'd have a local fire station in one of the small beachside towns, you'd have the albatross colony that would receive funding, you'd have social groups, all sorts of huge range of different things that we went and filmed. So I was doing that, and I had thought, yes, I'll stay and I'll do that because then I can come to London with a bit more money, which is always handy. And I'd been doing that for about 6 months when they decided they were going to move the lotto draw from Auckland to Wellington, and Maurice Wipani, who was doing the draw then, had decided she didn't want to do that. She wanted to pursue her acting career, and they asked me if I would front Lotto. And so that sort of was bit of a, do I want to do that? Because it was a 3-year contract.
Right. Big commitment. Yeah. You had your sights on London somewhat at that stage. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. And it was quite funny because I had a lot of friends that worked in the industry, and there was sort of some that were like, God, grab it, take it. And there was some that was, is it selling out? In the end, I took it, and it was, an amazing job to have. It was fabulous, because it was live. It was still doing the lottery grant stories, so I was still going around the country and filming those. I worked with a terrific co-host. Grant Kiriyama was fantastic to work with. We really, had a nice kind of chemistry. They do these incredible, the first ad they did to launch us onto the show was unbelievable. They closed down this massive beachside park and had casts of thousands of different ethnicities and cultural groups, and had this incredible festive fair that they filmed us as being part of. And so it was like being on massive film sets when they did those commercials. And they were a really, really good company to work for. They were, they were like family, and it was great.
And it was was it weekly or more frequent than that?
It was weekly,
and we would 15 minutes, is that right?
No, it was only 5 minutes. We would sometimes do specials at Christmas or New Year, but it was only 5 minutes.
So what's the sort of preparation? What was the routine? What was a day or a week in the life of a Lotto host?
Well, there'd often be promotional work that you'd do. So you'd go out to one of the local Lotto stores and you'd sell tickets, and you'd do part of a big fair that they'd have, and you'd do sort of entertainment and stuff like that. So that was a key part of it as well.
Yeah.
If we had performers like Michael Crawford or Christina Aguilera or Vanessa May, people like that came over to New Zealand for shows, we would often go and film them, interview them, or have them come on the draw.
Right.
Because the 5 minutes was, it's amazing what you can pack into 5 minutes.
No doubt.
But you'd also have your lottery grant stories that you did. And we'd have a script meeting once a week where we'd all sit together, and this has to go in, this has to go in, or we're launching a new thing like Strike, or when Powerball came into play. You had to figure out how you could fit those things into the draw.
Right.
So I was quite involved with that side of things.
Would you do your script, or would that be...
Yeah. In the end I was. But, in the early days, because it was co-host, I went on to do the draw on my own for a number of years.
Right.
But in the early days, it would be like an hour-long meeting, and we'd throw things in. This needs to be covered, this needs to be covered, and this needs to be covered. And then Grant and I would work out what we were going to say.
Presumably rehearse before.
Yeah. You would you'd go out to Avalon. The draw went out at 8 at night, so you'd be at Avalon from 6 p.m. You'd go to makeup, and then you'd go down to the studio. We did have a huge studio. One of the biggest studios in the Southern Hemisphere, Studio 8 at Avalon, and so we do dress rehearsals, get the lighting right, get the positions of everything right.
Yeah.
When we first started doing it, we had this staircase that we came down that had like a neon light down the side of it, and I'll never forget being told, if you fall, just don't reach out to the side because you'll electrocute yourself.
Health and safety.
Yeah, health and safety. Brilliant. What happened to that? We had a dress rehearsal about 20 minutes before we went on air, where they'd use the real balls, and they'd have the scrutineers and everybody in place. And then you'd have the countdown live to air.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you were actually presenting, you had the script obviously organised, but was it in your head? Was there an auto cue that you were using? How did it work?
It was we had an auto cue, and we had that for years. And then at some point, there was a decision made that it wasn't looking live enough like you were saying, it's quite good to have the scrubby and, you know, a bit of scrappy stuff going on. So they thought, well, they'll take the auto cue away.
Okay.
But, you know, it's what we do for a living, so it didn't really make any difference. So the only thing was that, I think it was really good for my short-term memory. I developed a really good short-term memory and a not so good long-term memory, because you have these scripts, 5-minute scripts that you have to sort of lock in, and then you sort of push them out at the other end.
How much of it, as you filmed, was on script versus a little bit ad-libby?
It depended who. If you had a guest on, then you had to kind of go off script, because you have to listen to what they said.
Right.
And as the draw sort of progressed, and in the end, the last few years that I was there, it was very much just, you know, it was a bit, for me it had become a bit, they'd stopped doing the guest roles, they'd stopped doing a lot of the things that the lottery grant stuff, they'd stopped doing a lot of the things that I'd loved about it, and it had become for me slightly Groundhog Day-ish, and that the only difference was the numbers coming out, and it was all kind of scripted on auto cue. And,
you really knew what you were doing.
You kind of, it sort of, lost for me a bit of its appeal.
Though you did have some marvellous guests on. You mentioned a couple already, Michael Crawford. Any highlights there for you?
Yeah, he was such a nice man, and we actually interviewed him twice. And it was quite funny, because I never assumed for a minute that he would remember that I'd interviewed him before, and so the second time I was asking him something and reintroducing myself, and he said, "Yes, I know, Hilary. We've met before. Don't you remember?"
Marvellous memory.
I thought, well, somebody would have told him, you know, his agent or his PA or something that oh, you know, you've met these guys before.
Okay.
I'm sure of it. But he was, you know, but it's that kind of thing that he sort of really warms you to a person.
It's an extraordinary juxtaposition as a character, isn't he? Because I remember him as Frank Spencer.
I know.
Right. And what was the program called? Some Mums Do
Some
Have
mums,
Him.
Yeah, Some Mums Do Have Him.
And he was this sort of bumbling, sort of Mr. Bean-like comic actor, and then he shows up as the main character in Phantom of the Opera with this incredible voice. I remember working in a pizza restaurant with my mate Mike, making pizzas, listening to Phantom of the Opera. This is Michael Crawford.
He was extraordinary. But he started off singing, because he was in Hello Dolly.
Right.
With Barbara Streisand.
So this was
I remember,
return.
I'm very good with movies.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic. I want to move on and talk about Dreamcatchers, because that's your current project. I, as I said at the outset, found this Dreamcatcher series sitting on Air New Zealand, flying from London to Auckland's plenty of time, about 30 hours.
Not much else to do.
And I just started watching them, and they're these stories that Hilary masterfully crafts about Kiwis who are doing really inspiring things. And as a Kiwi myself, I found it really, really uplifting to watch. Where did the idea come from, and what's happening next?
Yeah, when I moved over here, it was not long after the Christchurch earthquake had happened, and so there was that galvanised a lot of the New Zealand community to pull together on this side of the world and all around the world actually, to sort of try and help raise funds for Christchurch. And it was at those events that I started to meet Kiwis, such as yourself. You know, I didn't meet you then, but I've met you now. You should have been in the series. Who I thought, you know, why don't we know about these Kiwis back home? How come we never hear about them? And our young people should be celebrating what we're doing on a world stage. Because, you know, I'm talking about people like Dame Judith Mayhew Jonas, who was the first woman to lead the City of London, the first woman to be a chair of the Royal Opera House, the first woman to be a provost of King's College in Cambridge, the CEO of Virgin Group is a Kiwi, the CEO of the Royal Bank of Scotland is a Kiwi. There's all these New Zealanders doing entertainment, doing interior design, that are household names here, and you know, we should be celebrating them. And so the idea sort of simmered away, and I sort of approached, you know, several places back in New Zealand about trying to raise funding for it, but it never sort of got off the ground. And then I got talking to a Kiwi guy over here called Kent Gardner, who's a remarkable person. And he had been thinking along similar lines that, you know, our young people should be hearing these stories and be inspired. And so he came on board as a mentor and also was very involved in sort of helping me to make it happen, introducing me to the right people in terms of getting the extra funds that were required.
Not cheap, right?
Not cheap, not for broadcast quality. And I wanted it to be a really good quality production.
Which it is.
Because I wanted it to be stimulating for young people. I wanted them to see the very best of these people, and also, you know, they deserved to look their best and sound their best and come across as they are, which is, you know, they're great New Zealanders. So that was a key for me, that it be a quality production. And so once the funding was raised, I worked very closely with Tanya Beersley from Kia, who came on board.
Shout out to Tanya.
Tanya, go Tanya! Who came on board as our research assistant, and she and I would get together over coffees and start batting names around and who can we, you know, who's here and who would work with this. And the idea was to theme each episode because that was the cleanest way to do it.
Right.
So we had like arts and culture, entertainment, business leaders, high performance for sport, you know, homes and gardens. So there was sort of an entrepreneurs, and so it was quite easy to sort of slot people in to different sort of areas. And because it was also, hopefully, you know, the idea was that it would go into schools in New Zealand, I'd formed a relationship with a company called Network for Learning, who had a digital platform called Pond that was connecting all of the schools in New Zealand so that it would be able to be used as it would become part of their program. They could put it in and it would become a resource for teachers to use. Unfortunately, once the series was made, that had been disbanded. But I'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, so that was where it was ultimately going to end up. And so we went out, we filmed it over about 2 months in London. A small crew. There were 5 of us that went round. We filmed more than 60 New Zealanders because I wanted to have. Originally, I wanted to have them all in there, and I wanted to have as many different types of stories as I could get,
something
so that you could kind of and eventually, you know, the program would expand so that if, you know, all those stories would get heard. So we filmed 60 stories, not just in London, but we went around the country. We found those Kiwis. We tracked them down.
Using the chips that we're all issued with, of course.
Exactly. And yeah, we'd have about half-hour interviews, which then in the editing suite got narrowed down to, it had to be punchy, because, you know, young people's concentration spans nowadays, they boom, 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 boom. So in the end, TVNZ did take the program to broadcast it, which was fantastic. Although they hadn't been on board with funding, they did decide that it was good they'd take it. So we had 8 22-minute episodes with 4 fantastic Kiwis featuring each episode. So each story was about 5 minutes long. So it was like bang, 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 bang. And that's where my partner Robert Whitehouse, who's involved in films, was invaluable, because he would oversee, like, I'd go and work in the editing suite with the editor. Shout out to Rob. And Rob would, you know, keep an eye on the pace to make sure that they were all at a similar pace. So it was, you know, if I was dragging my heels with someone, you need to.
Well, I have to say, it's beautifully filmed, beautifully constructed, and I can say from personal experience, it really does draw you in and keep you moving through those stories. Imagine there's a classroom in Napier or Nelson or Hamilton watching now. What is it about this thing that should attract them? Why should they watch what you've done here?
I think they should watch because the lessons that each person gives is kind of invaluable in terms of us as New Zealanders. There's definite things that Kiwis have on a world stage that make us special. Because we're an isolated country, we do generalise, so we do a lot of things. We get a lot of good grounding in a lot of different areas. So we understand things from, the ground up often. We're also problem solvers, because I guess you can hark back, to our DNA and the number 8 wire, and
Kiwi ingenuity.
You have to, you couldn't find somebody to do something, so you'd have to figure out how to do it yourself.
Right.
So we are problem solvers. We're egalitarian, so I think in places like the UK, not so much now, but there was a lot of boxing in of people, whereas we'd come over and we couldn't really be boxed, so that was a help, and tenacity. We don't tend to give up. We kind of like, once we get our teeth into something, we're sort of like dogs with a bone, and we're gonna do it. I mean, take this for instance, and I don't consider myself for a minute to have been a tenacious person, but this took, from the time I made the trailer to try and get funding, it was 2014.
Right.
And this went to air in New Zealand, last year.
Wow.
So it doesn't happen overnight, and we cannot expect that. And I think that's a really important lesson for young people to understand as well, that
hard graft.
You got to put in the hours, and everything that, even from my perspective, from my career, I put in a lot of hours doing a lot of things that people might not have known that I did, like the writing of the scripts, like the directing of some of the inserts for the draw, like all of that, which has now been a huge help for me, to write and direct and produce this.
New experience for you, even though you've been in the industry a long time.
So you can start doing one thing, and you can end up doing something completely different, but the skills that you learn in another area can sometimes be invaluable later on.
Do you know what? I think that's a fantastic message for young people, right? We live in this world where the only constant is change.
I know.
And being able to sort of reinvent yourself and pivot and learn new skills on a continuous basis is just invaluable. I'm really excited to hear what happens next with this series. I'm very hungry to see more.
Okay, well, what's going to happen next is, like I mentioned earlier, unfortunately the Pond platform was disbanded. So I've been busy trying to work out ways of trying to get it into the educational system so that young people in New Zealand do see it. And I've been in various conferences and things with my main backers as well, which were Kent and the wonderful Paul Goff, who was also really involved with the idea that,
shout out to Paul.
Shout out to Paul, so that our kids see these stories and feel inspired. And this is where you come in too with Google, because of course YouTube is the natural place for it to go, because it's the easiest way for them to access it. So that's what I'm working on, and you're kindly showing me how you do all of these things, so that of course I can update the stories as well, and keep adding to them, because there'll be more and more stories that come up, and actually, some of these people that we filmed, they're doing even bigger and better things now than they were when I filmed them. So I need to update those stories.
Part 2 and Part 3 and etc.
Yeah.
So if somebody's interested in funding, how do they do that?
Oh, well, they can they come on through you? They can
come on through me. I'll put the link below through to your website.
Yeah,
you've got
that'd
a website
be fantastic,
for this,
and we've got contact information on that. But some sponsorship for this would be absolutely incredible. So if you can help in any way, and you want, and it's not just New Zealand kids, it's all young people, to just see these stories and appreciate that.
Absolutely.
This is maybe how you too could be great.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, I really look forward to that, and we can spend some 15 minutes afterwards to talk about how to get it onto YouTube, because that's pretty easy as well.
Thank you.
But all of these things cost money, don't they? So
and this has been a labour of love for me.
It
it really has.
And an absolutely delightful one. look, any closing messages? A lot of the people who watch this are probably ending their schools, or maybe coming out of university, maybe even having their first pivot in their career. Any advice?
Just do it. Get on with it. You know, anything's possible. That sounds like a Lotto commercial.
Well, it's fantastic advice and timeless advice. Hilary Timmins, you're an absolute inspiration. Thank you so much for spending your time.
Thank you.